Joe Schoen knocks out of the park in the first round in his first draft as GM of the New York Giants, as the Giants select Kayvon Thibodeaux, pass rusher from Oregon, defensive end, and the 7th overall pick being Evan Neal, offensive lineman, tackle, who will likely play right tackle from Alabama. So Thibodeaux and Evan Neal was really about as ideal as you could have asked for. And the draft played out perfectly for Joe Schoen, as he basically knew that he wanted to address the offensive line as well as really improving upon that pass rush. So the Giants last year selected Azeez Ojulari, and he had a pretty good rookie season, but that's basically it. Giants really have nothing else to speak of. And so Thibodeaux, who really, after the college season ended, now what the order would have been, I'm not sure, but I think if you looked at most mock drafts, the consensus was that the top three, in no order, seemed to be Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeaux, and Evan Neal. And certain players really jumped up, and that happens a lot. But for the Giants to get these players at 5 and 7, this is a monumental step up, and just a really, really good job. And I'm just impressed by how Schoen maneuvered the situation. So let's go through the draft. And the Jaguars take Trayvon Walker, a guy that really rose, on the draft board. He goes number 1 to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, I think the thought was going to be that Walker and Aiden Hutchinson were going to go 1-2. People weren't exactly sure of the order. I thought Hutchinson might go 1, but Aiden Hutchinson ends up going number 2 to the Detroit Lions, which he went to the University of Michigan. So whereas a lot of players may not like going to the Detroit Lions, Aiden Hutchinson might not mind that, especially when it's either Jacksonville or Detroit. May as well go, to a place that he's used to. So that's the first 2 picks. Then is when things start getting interesting. Derek Stingley, cornerback, goes to the Texans. And at this point, I'm thinking that's great. Stingley was not someone who I was really all that interested in. If anything, I kind of thought Ahmad Sauce Gardner was, the better of the two, in terms of cornerbacks. The New York Jets, in fact, select Sauce Gardner for the number 4 overall pick. So what that means is that Ikem Ekwonu and Evan Neal are both available. And also Kayvon Thibodeaux. I think if we were to really ask ourselves between what was realistic and what we wanted, I think if you're a Giant fan, you knew you wanted the offensive lineman. Like, that had to happen. And then the other pick, you would have been fine with either Thibodeaux or, let's just say, Sauce Gardner. So let's say if the Jets, I think what would have happened, now Joe Schoen was very transparent after the draft, and it kind of makes sense. He says that he liked 6 players. And remember, the Giants had picks 5 and 7. So I think if he hadn't liked at pick 7, I think he had a lot of contingency plans. I think he probably would have traded down if it didn't go to his liking, but things worked out really well. So while Neal and Ekwonu might have been above Thibodeaux on their draft board, they knew, look, if we take Thibodeaux here, that will leave us with one of Neal or Ekwonu. However, if they do take Neal or Ekwonu at 5, Thibodeaux could theoretically get taken at 6, and there's a big drop-off at edge after Thibodeaux. So it's just smart. Unless you had, and they clearly didn't, a really strong feeling on who you like more between Ekwonu and Neal. And I think really the consensus among everyone was that those were the 2 guys. There was talk about Charles Cross, who ended up going number 9 to the Seahawks, but I think that would have been a disappointment among Giant fans, and I'm glad that the Giants didn't go in that direction. But this was just smart. Like I said, because you never know. Someone could have theoretically, maybe if Carolina didn't like Thibodeaux, maybe someone else would have, and they would have traded up to the 6th spot. So the Giants grabbed Kayvon Thibodeaux. And when it happened, I was happy about it, but I really wanted to secure that offensive tackle. But like I said, that was so key, really, about the fact that the Giants ended up with that number 7 overall pick. And at the time, there was a chance that, maybe that was going to be 8 or 9, depending on how things played out. I remember I was extremely happy about the fact that the Giants, had lost down the stretch. Well, not the Giant pick, the Chicago pick, where Chicago, they had that game with the Vikings the last week of the season. And who knows, like if this was 5-8, the Giants may not have really been able to, they wouldn't have had the luxury to do that. But things worked out well to the point where Giants take Thibodeaux at 5, then Ekwonu goes at 6, and Evan Neal at 7. Shane didn't say who he had higher on his board between Ekwonu and Neal, but there was a lot of talk about the Giants selecting Neal, and maybe that was because the thought was that maybe Ekwonu would have been taken in the top 4 picks, but clearly Ekwonu being available at 5, it's not as if they just, totally dropped everything at once and said, we have to have this guy. So like I said, like I've been trying to reiterate, clearly Ekwonu and Neal were very, very close in terms of their evaluation on those players. So really thrilled to have these two players. And I don't see how you could think any way else, because yes, trading down would have been ideal, but it wasn't that type of draft. The first quarterback wasn't taken until pick 20. So, and yes, there were, we saw the first trade at pick 11. So it's not as if it didn't happen, but not in the top 10. And so, this was really, really a great job by the front office. I think Thibodeaux is going to be, a really exciting player. The Giants have lacked that big-time pass rushing threat. That was the key to these to the Giant teams. I mean, the Giants, when you think of this organization, that has been what has led to the most success for this franchise. Lawrence Taylor, really the big ones, Lawrence Taylor and Michael Strahan, but of course many others, Osi Umenyiora, Justin Tuck, and just having, that presence really has led. I mean, when you look at the Giants' 4 Super Bowls, that's the constant theme. Forget about anything else. It is the ability to pressure the quarterback. So just reading analysis on Thibodeaux, and I believe this is from Bucky Brooks. Thibodeaux is a boomer bust blue chip player with impressive physical tools and an unstoppable speed rush maneuver. The Oregon product displays exceptional balance and body control, turning the corner with outstanding instincts and snap count anticipation, enhancing his speed rush attempts. The electric pass rusher could blossom into a destructive force as a pro. So, Thibodeaux really was someone that I think is viewed upon as maybe the best pass rusher in the draft. Of course, Trayvon Walker and Aiden Hutchinson were selected before him, but Thibodeaux is certainly up there in terms of upside. As far as Evan Neal, and his Bucky Brooks' analysis on Evan Neal. Neal is a supersized edge blocker with natural skills as a left tackle, although he'll play right for the Giants. The 6'7", 337-pounder is a patient technician with the length to stymie pass rushers off the edge and the power to blow defenders off the ball. The Alabama standout is a powerful run blocker, but not quite as nasty as some of his counterparts in this class. So Neal is someone who clearly has the talent. And, according to Brooks, if he can just increase that nasty, which I think is something that he certainly can develop, he could really be a force. And so you have the bookends, Thomas and Neal, and the Giants have made a lot of additions on the interior. Lewinsky, Feliciano, Garcia, really on and on. And, that doesn't include the likes of Shane Lemieux, maybe Nick Gates returns from injury. So this offensive line, it's getting better. It's finally improving. And now the Giants are also improving in terms of rushing the passer. So these you cannot complain with this. And now I think that the Giants have the number 4 pick in the second round. I think a cornerback is going to be in play, James Bradbury or not. Even if Bradbury's on the roster, you can never have enough cornerbacks. So I think the Giants have 1 second-round pick, which is early, and then 2 thirds. I think you're going to see a cornerback be taken with one of those picks. I wouldn't be surprised if you see maybe an inside linebacker or maybe an interior defensive lineman. And I know, the Giants exercised the 5th-year option on Dexter Lawrence, but I could see that. And then also with that 3rd pick, don't be surprised if maybe it's a wide receiver or even a running back. With Saquon Barkley's future very, very uncertain, I don't mind, in sort of the late 3rd round going for a skill position player, but I think the Giants are set up pretty nicely. Based on the way the draft has gone so far, it might be tough for them to grab interior linemen, which I think they would like to do But like I said, they've already made a lot of additions there, so I don't think it's the end of the world. But really, as a Giant fan, this is exciting. This is the start of the new era for this team. The best thing Dave Gettleman ever did was give us that 7th overall pick, which we used to draft Evan Neal. And just like I said, the combination was key here. Very key. If the Giants only had the number 5 pick, let's just say, my guess would be that it would have been Evan Neal or Ekwonu. And if it had not been, and like I said, it cannot be really understated, or I guess overstated, that the fact that it was number 7, so close to number 5, gave the Giants this unique ability. If Ekwonu gets taken in the top 4, then all of a sudden you run that risk of someone not being there. But they knew they had the whole thing mapped out. They had all the scenarios. They were prepared for this. And Joe Schoen is someone who, so far, I trust the direction that he's going to take this team in. And I really couldn't have said that, really, the Dave Gettleman era, certainly not. And then really towards the end of Jerry Reese, that wasn't great either. So it's going to be a long road for the Giants. I mean, look, this is just the beginning of the draft. There's, 6 more rounds to go. And so, but I think the Giants are headed in the right direction. Again, the Giants have added to the roster a dominant pass rusher in Kayvon Thibodeaux and a rock-solid offensive tackle in Evan Neal. Let's see what Joe Schoen and the rest of the front office have in mind for the rest of this draft. But if it's anything like this, it should be a pretty good draft.